so far what we've done is that we've done cases where we've done perfect competition in the labor market. So there is perfect competition in the labor market, right? We've also done monopsony in the labor market, and monopsony case may what we've done is this case where we said that if you're the single firm in the market, if this is your supply of labor, and if your marginal cost is like this, right? And let's say this is your demand for labor, which is your MRP, then MC equals to MRP is happening here. We're saying monopsony is going to pay higher QM workers and will be paying WM wages. Now, this market, as compared to the market, perfectly competitive market, would have paid uh, W, let's say C, and the quantity would have been QC. So yesterday's conclusion was this: monopsony pay you less and also employ less workers, right? This was the conclusion we made yesterday about the monopsony market. Now today, um, Umar, I'm going to ask Sir Raza to do that. I'm going to ask Sir Raza to upload the videos. Thank you for the reminder. Also, write an email and CC, write an email to Sir Raza and CC me as well. So it will be for our sort of record as what we need to do. Okay, can you do that, Umar? Okay, guys. Now, third case that I'm going to do is basically I'm going to have monopsony versus trade union. So what is trade union? Trade unions are basically organizations that are working in the interest of the workers. So now workers come together and they form a group, right? And they will do what we call collective bargaining. They will come together, they collectively bargain, the collective bargaining will take place, and they will. This is case three, exactly. This is case three where monopsony is up against trade union. Now, in this case, guys, what is important to understand: trade unions are negotiating with the employer on salaries, they're negotiating with the employer on working condition, on working hours, on various ways, and bargaining for the causes of the workers, the trade unions are also trying to basically make sure that the interests of the workers are safeguarded, right? So this is an important part to understand, that the trade union ends up benefiting because there's power in collective bargaining. But we need to discuss two things, like when is trade union more powerful and less powerful. Also, we need to discuss when trade union does come together and form a group, how does this diagram or how does this equilibrium change? Because right now, I'm assuming monopsony up against trade union, and this is a case of what we call bilateral. Bilateral means two-sided monopoly. Both parties are monopoly, and we're saying the collective bargaining will decide ultimately the equilibrium. Okay, so I want to read some couple of lines that um, in the case of a bilateral monopoly where a monopsony is up against a trade union, the equilibrium relationship will ultimately depend on relative bargaining power. So this is a key thing to understand. I want to talk about this, that it will be depend on relative bargaining power or strength and the skills of the union and monopsonies, as there is no single equilibrium. This is a very unique case. There will not be any single equilibrium. There could be any equilibrium depending on bargaining power of the parties. So I'm going to show you how this works in 1 minute. But before I do that, uh, I just want to do a couple of things, guys. I want you guys to draw the diagram with me. Okay, can we draw the diagram together? And secondly, let's do this. Let's make a dotted supply of labor, which is upward sloping, and I'm going to tell you why in a little while. And let's also draw a dotted marginal cost of labor. Okay, and then we draw a solid demand for labor, which is MRP. Okay, can we do that? Can we do that, guys? Are we good to move on? Tell me when we're ready to move on because we want to draw it together. Okay. Okay. Now what we'll do is this, guys, that here the two things that matter is this, that if this market was perfectly competitive, the equilibrium would have been here, where demand meets supply. Isn't that true? So I'm just, don't draw it. I'm just pointing out, because this market is monopsony, the equilibrium is right now here. So let's call this QM and WM. Okay, we can draw this equilibrium QM and WM. Now, trade union is trying to get a very good rate, and let's say trade union says, give us the competitive wage rate or more. Okay, so trade union is saying to the firms that give us this competitive wage rate or more. Okay, so they're asking for this wage rate, okay, or more. In other words, W, let's call it W A S L, W A S L is my new supply curve, because trade union is saying, give us this wage rate or more. Okay, which means, let's call this point X, guys, which means X to A is that part of the supply curve. X to A is that part of the supply curve that is no longer valid. Why? Because trade union is saying, give us this or more, but we won't work anything below this. Do you all agree with me what trade union is asking for? So trade union is saying हमें W wage rate दें जो competitive wage rate से equal है, give us the competitive wage rate or more, but nothing below will be acceptable to us. Right? Do we get this, guys? Do we get the idea? Do we get the idea, guys?
Sir,
Yeah.
uh, sir, firstly, sir, ये QM और WM में क्या हम मतलब ये perfectly मतलब ये competitive market में हम पहले हम
Competitive market में तो demand और supply matter करती है, right? Competitive market में demand
okay
supply matters. So that's the wage rate. That's the wage rate, right? हमने कहा, that's why the labor market is asking for, the trade union is asking for wage rate that is competitive. Okay. Now, if this is the supply curve, what's the marginal cost curve? And this is a point that we need to understand, that my supply curve is now a little weird one, because it's going to be W to A, which is perfectly elastic. So there's a perfectly elastic zone, and then there is upward sloping slope. When the supply curve is perfectly elastic, we did this yesterday's class. When the supply curve is perfectly elastic, guys, then the supply curve is also your marginal cost curve. Isn't that true? So for W to A, my supply curve is going to be my marginal cost curve. So my marginal cost curve, if I make my marginal cost curve, is going to be W A, and then it's going to, for this part of my supply curve, I may need to go all the way up. Okay, and this is the rest of my marginal cost curve. So my marginal cost curve is going to be weird, because it's going to be WA, which is elastic, and then it goes all the way to B. Okay, W A B and then MCL. Are you all with me? So W A B MCL. Does that make sense, guys? Are we good? Do we get the idea? Because when the supply curve was perfectly elastic, marginal cost was also perfectly elastic. When the supply curve is upper sloping, marginal cost is also upper sloping. Do we get that? Are we good to move on, guys? Any questions, guys? Okay, no problem. Zavin, please copy it. But other people, do we get the explanation of what I'm saying? This, guys, can when the supply curve is perfectly elastic, marginal cost is perfectly elastic. Now, one thing to understand is that because x to a, guys, this is important to understand. Because x to a supply curve was not there, right? X to b marginal cost is also not valid. Your x to a supply curve is not valid, right? And therefore x to b marginal cost is also not valid. That's why I made it dotted, because when x to a doesn't exist, when the workers are saying I'm not going to work below w, which means x to a is not working, is no longer valid, then x to b is also no longer valid. Make sense, guys? Do we get it? Are we good? Any questions? Okay, now guys, let's look at where will the equilibrium be. And the answer is this: equilibrium happens when MC equals to MRP. Now MC is WABMC and MRP is this. So MC equals to MRP now happens at A, which means if the trade union says we want a higher wage rate, W, then automatically employment level, then equilibrium will be at A, where MC equals to MRP is happening, and therefore the new quantity will be, let's say, Q star. Make sense? So the equilibrium employment level, I'm going to zoom this diagram, guys. Equilibrium employment level will also be basically more, and the wage will be more. So what is the trade union going to do, guys? Trade union in this case will be able to negotiate. Let me write this also. That trade union will be able to trade union will be able to negotiate a higher wage rate and the level of employment. Make sense? So both higher wage rate and level of employment. Area under WAB, this area, the area of bargaining. I'm going to talk about the area of bargaining. I'm going to talk about this in 1 minute as to what are the various bargaining wages we can talk about. Okay, so guys, do we get the equilibrium? Because now let's talk about the various possible bargaining things that can happen right now. So we've said this, that the trade union has asked for competitive wage rate. There are two things that we should ask. Okay, what if trade union is not that powerful? What will be the wage rate? Or what if trade union is extremely powerful? Can it go for more than the competitive wage rate? So two things I want to talk about. First thing is, what if the trade union is not at all powerful? If the trade union is not at all powerful, then the wage rate will be very close to WM. Are you all with me? If the trade union is not that powerful, the wage rate will be like somewhere here. Why? Because the monopsony will want you to get WM. The more powerful you get, the higher the wage rate. But you should say, okay, what if this was not the wage rate? What if the trade union says that, you know what, give us like this wage rate or more? Make sense? Or even like give us, for example, this wage rate. What will happen then? If they give you very high wage, they ask for very high wage rate, let's say T, the problem of that would be now when this becomes my supply curve, then this is a perfectly elastic marginal cost curve. The equilibrium would happen now at this point. So let's call this point to be H. If this point H happens, then what you're doing, guys, is that when you ask for a very high wage rate, you are making your level of employment to also go down to also go down to this level. So the biggest problem that happens when you are asking for a very high wage rate is that you end up causing employment level to suffer. So when the trade union is really, really powerful and it goes for an equilibrium wage rate to be to the negotiated wage rate to be above the competitive wage rate, they will only end up causing unemployment or employment level to go down. And when employment level go down beyond this wage rate W, number of people that you have working for you go down. So trade union, as long as, and I want to show you, write this point, very important point here, that as long as trade union is negotiating a wage rate equal to or less than competitive wage rate, the wage and level of employment will rise. Make sense? So as long as the trade union is negotiating a wage rate equal to or less than competitive, because guys, अगर तो let me make another diagram. What if trade union says कि हमें इतने पैसे चाहिए, इतने या more, right? उस सूरत हाल में marginal cost आपकी marginal cost होगी this and then this. उस सूरत हाल में भी employment आपकी बढ़ती है. Okay, your employment keeps on going up as long as you are going towards the equilibrium wage rate to be close to competitive wage rate. But when you go a little greedy and you ask for a wage rate more than the competitive wage rate, you will end up causing the employment level to go down. Wage to मिल जाएगी, but employer के लिए profitability बहुत खराब हो जाएगी. The employment's profitability will get affected significantly. Are you all with me? Does that make sense? Are we good, guys? Exactly, redundancies, people will lose job and so on. There is a very important sort of discussion we need to talk about is when is trade union more powerful, because that comes in a lot in MCQs. But are we happy with this case? If you're happy with this, are we good to move on? Okay, guys, let's do the fourth case, and then I'm going to talk about when is fourth case is really easy, but let's do the fourth case, and then we can talk about uh, when is trade union more powerful. So, case number four is trade union in a perfectly competitive market. Okay, now producers were competitive, or your employers were competitive, suddenly trade union is formed. So what will happen? So first thing first, your demand is going to be like this, which is MRP, and supply is going to be upper sloping. Remember, this is the whole market. Okay, suddenly trade union is formed. What will happen now is that trade union will be there like, give us WT. So they give us more than equilibrium wage rate. Are you all with me? So suddenly a trade union आएगी और competitive wage rate था W1 and employment level था Q1. You have a problem now because the trade union is going to be like, give us a higher wage, which would mean quantity supplied will go to Q2, more workers will be wanting to work, but because wage rate has gone up, it's going to be not that profitable to hire workers. This is going to be Q3, and therefore you have what do we call this gap, guys? The gap between Q2 minus Q3. What is that going to be called? Unemployment. Good job, Daniel. Unemployment. There will be unemployment of Q2 minus Q3. Now, how many people are losing job? So, how many people will lose job? Anyone? Q1 minus Q3. Good job, Daniel. Q1 minus Q3 people will lose job. Why? Because they were working before, but these many people will lose it. But total unemployment will be Q2 minus Q3. So if any MCQ asks you what's the total unemployment, that will be Q2 minus Q3. But how many people will lose job? That will be Q1 minus Q3. Make sense, guys? So in a competitive setting, when you introduce trade union, you will cause unemployment to happen. Something similar to this case, guys. Either be beyond the competitive rate, you are causing uh, harm to your members. Similarly, here, beyond the competitive rate, you are causing harm to your members. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, guys? Any questions before we move on? Okay, guys. So quickly discussing when is trade union more powerful? Let's look at the list. When is trade union versus uh, employer more powerful? If there is unemployment in the economy, and this is a discussion that comes a lot in MCQs. If there is unemployment in the economy, who do you think will be more powerful? Anyone? Who will be more powerful? If there is unemployment, exactly, the employer will be more powerful. And the reason why employer will be more powerful will be because employer will be like, if you don't work for me, if you don't agree to my terms, I will hire somebody else from the market. So when labor force is scarce and there are shortages of workers, the balance of power will be with trade union. Vice versa, when labor is not scarce, right? And when there is no shortage of labor, when there is unemployment, then the employer will be more powerful. Unions are always less powerful when the demand for labor is falling and labor is less scarce. So if there is unemployment, you will see the employer to be more powerful. And so therefore bargaining power will be in the favor of employer. Secondly, competitive competitive pressure in the product market. If there is a lot of competition in the product market, everyone is competing on prices, then you know this, that the trade union will be weak. Why would trade union be weak? Because trade union would know you can't really get anything out of an employer who's already really paying such low margins. So the idea goes this: if there is competitive pressure in the product market, more power will be with there will be less power with trade union. But if there is a monopoly, if you have a very profitable employer, you can negotiate and get a higher salary from him. So when there is a competitive pressure in the product market, trade union will be weak or employer will be more powerful. But when there is a monopoly employer, if there is a monopoly employer who's making a lot of money, trade union can get a lot out of him because he has more to give as well. So the union will know that the employer has the financial resources to meet a more generous wage settlement. There could be more that you can get out of the trade union. Got it? The third one is basically elasticity of demand for labor. And the concept here is that if the demand for labor is inelastic, you know, if the demand for labor is inelastic, for example, like doctors, right? Then this that demand, inelastic demand would mean trade union will be very powerful. A good example is in New York, for example, teachers trade union went on teachers trade union went on a strike, and teachers in New York public schools, when they went on strike, all the parents were not able to go to work because kids were not at school, but kids were at home. As a result of that, the the parents also joined that strike and forced the government to agree to teachers' requests or demands, because otherwise there is not going to be much of work for anyone else. Make sense, guys? So, Aniba, what I'm saying is this kid, when there is competitive pressure in the product market, there is lower margin. So you can't really negotiate for a higher salary from a guy who's already in a very competitive market. Why? Because if you ask for a higher salary, he will probably go out of business. Make sense? Aniba, does that make sense? That's why trade union is not really powerful in this scenario. Guys, so these were the 3 points that I wanted to discuss. I am done. I will see you guys now on Monday, and I will also let you guys know about the plan for the test. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. Take care, guys. Have a good one. Bye bye. Any questions before we end the class? Okay. Bye bye, guys.